Describe a time when you saw a lot of plastic waste, you should say. Where and when you saw the plastic waste. Why there was a lot of plastic waste. What you did after you saw it. And explain what your thoughts were about this.
Okay, here's the Band-Aid response. I'd like to talk about a time when I saw a lot of plastic waste at a beach near my hometown. It was last summer, and my friends and I decided to go to the beach for a picnic. When we arrived, I was really surprised and disappointed to see so much plastic waste everywhere. There were plastic bottles, food wrappers, and even broken plastic toys scattered all over the sand and near the water. I think the main reason for all this waste was that many people visited the beach during the holidays and didn't bother to throw their rubbish in the bins. Also, there weren't enough dustbins around, so people just left their trash on the ground. After seeing this, my friends and I decided to do something about it. We spent about an hour picking up as much plastic as we could and put it in the bins that were available. We also took some photos and shared them on social media to raise awareness about the problem. I felt both sad and angry that people could be so careless about the environment. It made me realize how serious the issue of plastic pollution is and how important it is for everyone to take responsibility. Since then, I've tried to use less plastic in my daily life and always make sure to throw my rubbish away properly. I hope more people will start caring about this problem because it affects not just the beauty of places like beaches, but also the animals on the planet.
Okay, that was part 2. Very solid. Now, moving straight into part 3 with some follow-up questions. First question. Do you think we should use plastic products?
I think we should try to avoid using plastic products as much as possible. Some plastic items are useful, like for medicine or food packaging, but most of the time we can use other materials. For example, I now use a cloth bag when I go shopping instead of a plastic one. If we keep using too much plastic, it will just create more pollution and harm the environment.
Okay. And how can we reduce our use of plastic?
We can reduce our use of plastic by making small changes in our daily lives. For example, we can carry reusable bags, use metal or glass bottles instead of plastic ones, and avoid buying things with a lot of plastic packaging. At home, my family has started using steel lunchboxes and stopped buying plastic straws. These small steps can really add up if everyone does them.
What kinds of plastic waste are often seen in your country?
In my country, the most common types of plastic waste are water bottles, food wrappers, and plastic bags. You can see them everywhere, especially in markets, parks, and on the sides of roads. Sometimes you also see plastic cups and plates after festivals or big events. It's a big problem because these things take a long time to break down.
And why do people like to use plastic products?
People like to use plastic products because they are cheap, light, and easy to carry. For example, plastic bags are given for free in many shops, and plastic bottles are convenient for drinking water on the go. Also, plastic doesn't break easily, so people think it's practical. But I think people don't always think about the long-term damage it causes.
What can the government do to reduce plastic pollution?
The government can help by making strict rules about using plastic. For example, they can ban single-use plastic bags or charge people for using them. They can also run campaigns to teach people about the dangers of plastic waste. In some cities, the government has started recycling programs, which is a good step. I think more education and strict laws can make a big difference.
And finally, for Band-Aid, do you think we can do without plastic altogether in the future?
Honestly, I think it would be very difficult to stop using plastic completely because it's used in so many things like medicine and technology. But I do believe we can reduce our use of plastic a lot and find better alternatives for most products. Maybe in the future, new materials will be invented that are as useful as plastic but safer for the environment.
Right. So that's the complete Band-Aid simulation. As you heard, definitely a strong performance. What are your initial thoughts? What makes this a Band-Aid?
Well, like you said, it's very solid. The fluency is good. There aren't many hesitations. The answers are, coherent. They follow a logical path. And the vocabulary is appropriate for the topic. Grammatically, it's mostly accurate. It does the jobs very effectively, gets the message across clearly. The answers directly address the questions. The examples are pretty relevant too.
Yeah, totally competent. So the big question then is, what takes it from that level, from good, solid Band 8 communication up to the next level, to a Band 9?
Yeah. That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so let's hear it. We're going to hear responses to the exact same questions, but this time aiming for that Band 9 standard. Listen closely, pay attention to the language, the depth, maybe the overall feel.
Okay.
So same part 2 task again. Describe a time when you saw a lot of plastic waste. Where and when, why, what you did, and your thoughts.
All right, band 9 response. I'd like to share an experience from a couple of years ago when I visited the famous Marine Drive in Mumbai with my family. It was during the monsoon season, and after a heavy rain, we decided to take a walk along the promenade. To my shock, the entire shoreline was littered with an overwhelming amount of plastic waste. Everything from water bottles and food containers to shopping bags and even old flip-flops. The waves had washed up so much debris that the beautiful view was almost completely ruined. The main reason for this was a combination of irresponsible littering by visitors and poor waste management in the city. During the rains, all the garbage from the streets gets swept into the sea, and eventually it comes back onto the shore. Seeing this, I felt a mix of sadness and frustration. I remember my younger brother asking me why people throw so much trash when there are bins around, and I honestly didn't have a good answer. Afterwards, I joined a local beach cleanup initiative the following weekend. It was eye-opening to see how much effort it takes to clear just a small stretch of beach. I also started talking to my friends about the impact of plastic pollution and encouraged them to reduce their single-use plastic consumption. This experience made me realize how interconnected our actions are with the environment. I began to pay more attention to my own habits, like carrying a reusable bottle and saying no to plastic straws. Overall, it was a wake-up call that made me much more environmentally conscious. I believe if more people saw the situation firsthand, they would be motivated to change their habits too.
Wow. Okay, now for the part 3 questions again, but at the Band 9 level. Do you think we should use plastic products?
While plastic has revolutionized modern life due to its versatility and affordability, I believe we should minimize its use, especially for single-use items. Plastics are incredibly durable, which is both a blessing and a curse. They persist in the environment for centuries. For instance, medical equipment and certain packaging are necessary, but for everyday items like bags and cutlery, sustainable alternatives exist. Ultimately, our goal should be to use plastic responsibly and only when truly necessary.
Okay. And how can we reduce our use of plastic?
Reducing plastic usage requires a combination of individual action and systemic change. On a personal level, we can switch to reusable bags, bottles, and containers and consciously avoid products with excessive packaging. Businesses can also help by offering eco-friendly alternatives and encouraging customers to make greener choices. For example, some cafes now give discounts to people who bring their own cups. Education and awareness campaigns are crucial to shift public attitudes and promote lasting change.
What kinds of plastic waste are often seen in your country?
In India, the most prevalent types of plastic waste include disposable water bottles, snack wrappers, and thin plastic bags. These are commonly found in public spaces, especially after festivals or public gatherings. Another growing problem is microplastics from synthetic clothing and personal care products, which often go unnoticed but have a significant environmental impact. Addressing these issues requires both better waste management and a shift in consumer behavior.
Why do people like to use plastic products?
People are drawn to plastic products because they're convenient, lightweight, and inexpensive. Plastic packaging keeps food fresh, and plastic containers are easy to carry. There's also a perception that plastic is more hygienic, especially for food and medical uses. However, this convenience often overshadows the long-term environmental costs. For example, people might choose plastic cutlery for a picnic, not realizing it will remain in a landfill for decades.
What can the government do to reduce plastic pollution?
Governments have a pivotal role in tackling plastic pollution. They can implement bans or taxes on single-use plastics, invest in better recycling infrastructure, and support research into biodegradable alternatives. Public awareness campaigns and educational programs can also shift societal attitudes. For example, some Indian states have successfully banned plastic bags, leading to a noticeable reduction in litter. Collaboration between government, businesses, and citizens is essential for lasting progress.
And the last one, do you think we can do without plastic altogether in the future?
Completely eliminating plastic is unlikely in the near future, given its integral role in sectors like healthcare, electronics, and transportation. However, I'm optimistic that with technological advances, we'll develop sustainable materials that can replace many plastic products. The key is to drastically cut down on unnecessary plastic and invest in innovation. If society prioritizes environmental health, a significant reduction in plastic dependency is definitely achievable.
Okay. So you, the listener, you've just heard both Band 8, Band 9, side by side almost. What was the difference? What jumped out at you?
It's quite striking, isn't it? For me, it's the depth of thought you can sense, and the language used reflects that. It goes beyond just providing an answer. It explores the topic in a broader context.
Yeah.
Thinking about it in terms of, say, assessment criteria, like in IELTS, it clearly shows a wider range of vocabulary, what they call lexical resource, and also more complex grammatical structures, used naturally, not forced.
Mm-hmm. It feels more sophisticated.
Right. The Band 9 responses, they weave in more complex ideas, show a more nuanced viewpoint, and the language itself carries more subtle meaning. It's not just what is said, but the richness, the texture of how it's said.
I definitely felt that. It's like the Band 8 was a very clear black and white photo, sharp focus, and the Band 9 was the same scene, but in vivid color, maybe even 3D, like you said earlier. It just has more layers.
That's a great analogy.
So let's dig into how that richness is achieved. Let's look closely at some specific vocabulary choices. And this isn't about just dropping in fancy words, right? It's about using the right word, the precise word, for maximum impact.
Exactly. Precision is key. Let's start with the Band 8 response again. Phrases like, really surprised and disappointed. Perfectly understandable, communicates the feeling.
Sure.
But compare that to the Band 9 opening for the same Part 2 story. To my shock. That phrase immediately hits harder, doesn't it? It conveys a stronger emotion.
It does. And then it followed with, the entire shoreline was littered with an overwhelming amount of plastic waste. Overwhelming amount paints a much clearer, stronger picture than just a lot or so much.
Precisely. And remember, the Band 9 said the view was almost completely ruined.
Yeah, ruin.
Yeah.
Much stronger than just saying it was spoiled or not nice. It implies serious damage.
Exactly. Now think about why the waste was there. Band 8 said people didn't bother to throw their rubbish. Band 9 used irresponsible littering.
Ah, okay. Irresponsible littering sounds more formal, maybe more analytical. It directly points to the carelessness.
It does. And think about the personal impact. Band 8 aimed to raise awareness. Band 9 described the cleanup as eye-opening and said the whole experience was a wake-up call that made them more environmentally conscious.
Right. Those phrases, eye-opening, wake-up call, environmentally conscious, they feel more specific, more descriptive of a real internal shift. Wake-up call, especially, that's a great idiomatic phrase.
And they talked about reducing single-use plastic consumption. Again, very specific terminology that signals a deeper engagement with the topic.
Okay, let's look at part 3. The Band 8 response to should we use plastic was straightforward. Try to avoid using plastic.
Yeah, clear. But the Band 9 response started by acknowledging the complexity. Plastic has revolutionized modern life due to its versatility and affordability, but then added it's both a blessing and a curse.
A blessing and a curse. Another great idiomatic phrase showing that ability to hold two opposing ideas. That's nuance right there.
Exactly. And when talking solutions, Band 8 mentioned small changes and strict rules. Band 9 talked about systemic change and governments having a pivotal role.
Systemic change, pivotal role. Those terms elevate the discussion, don't they? They frame it in terms of larger societal structures and policy importance, much more analytical.
Definitely. Even describing the waste itself, Band 8 listed common items, Band 9 mentioned the prevalent types, and also pointed out microplastics, which often go unnoticed.
That shows broader knowledge, awareness of less obvious aspects of the issue,
Yeah.
and using a word like prevalent instead of just common.
Right. It's consistently choosing the more precise, often more sophisticated, but still natural sounding word. It's not about using obscure words nobody knows. It's about lexical precision and range.
So you can really hear how that choice of vocabulary contributes to the overall higher band score. It signals a wider vocabulary, yes, but also better control in using it to express complex thoughts fluently and, well, appropriately.
It really is about selecting the word that fits perfectly, that adds layers, rather than just the word that gets the basic meaning across. That's what creates that richness and impact we talked about.
Right.
It lets you show not just what you think, but how deeply you thought about it.
That brings us towards the end of this deep dive. We've contrasted that clear, effective Band 8 communication with the fluent, nuanced, really precise expression of a Band 9. And the main takeaway, I think, for you listening isn't just about test scores. It's realizing that real communicative power often lies in that sophistication, that range. It's about being understood, yes, but also about truly connecting, making an impact, and conveying your ideas with, clarity and depth.
Which does leave us with a final thought, maybe a question for you to ponder. How can you take these insights, these observations about language use, and apply them to your own communication? Whether it's for an exam, sure, but also for work or just expressing yourself more effectively day to day.
Yeah, how can you cultivate that level of precision, that kind of impact in your own voice? Something to think about. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Keep exploring, keep listening, and keep working on refining how you communicate.